All right, so in the video, How to Fly to Your Perfect Tune, we showed the different step moves you need to do to really stress the PID controller to see how things are reacting with your tune, either by your ears or looking through the FPV camera or looking through HD footage. My favorite is looking at logs. So we're going to look at HD and logs, and we're going to see if there's any improvements we can do on the tune for the flight we took. So this is the quad that was in that video. It's a 5-inch 6S rig. The all-up weight is 742 grams with GoPro and everything included, and of course the battery. And it's got T-motor 1750 kV with HQ 5x5x3 V1S props. This is the current PIDs. So usually with a heavier quad like this, I'll usually start with Ds in the 45s. I'll set them equal, and then I'll just, use some experience on the P terms, usually 60, 65. I'll see how that goes. And at feed forward, I'll start above 150 somewhere, and that's just a general rule of thumb. Honestly, my yaw is a little low on this. I really started out with sliders on this, and then I kind of migrated into just typing in some numbers. So this is what we got so far on the setup, and looking at the filters, this is what I have on the filters. It's got my sliders at 1.4 on both, got the RPM filter working, one harmonic going all the way down to 80, so at lower RPMs, those notches do drop down pretty good. And I might adjust that and some dynamic notch settings here just based on some other things I've been doing recently. As always, when gathering a log, we want to grab gyro scaled. We're going to set that to 1 kilohertz recording rate. Once we have our log downloaded from our Perfect Moves flight, we're going to go ahead and open it. We're going to get our HD from our GoPro here. We're going to open that as well. And so you'd hit open for log in Black Box Explorer and then open again to open the video. That will overlay it here. What you can do then is I usually try to do some sort of punch out and a sharp move. And you can come to that sharp move, hit M for mark point, and then go find that spot in the video where it actually starts to make that sharp move. You can see right around there. And then what you can do is hit Alt M, and that will line the two things up. So you can see now I'm going through that move the whole way. It basically adjusts this thing up here, this time offset, so you can go ahead and copy that and paste it somewhere so you have it for next time you open the log, and then you open the video, you can just punch that 17.698 right in there and it will sync it up for you automatically. Once we have that all done, you can go and grab the UAV Tech trace templates. I'll link to a video in the upper right, Black Box 101, that you can check out. It shows some basic fundamentals of Black Box, talks about the P term, I term, D term, and shows you what some of those squiggly lines look like. And then, again, how to load the UAV Tech trace templates, and then we're going to be on trace template number 4. We're going to have Expo on, and let's get into looking at this log. So the first part of this is we have step moves up through. So some things I look for. I'm looking down here at these motor traces. So we have roll, pitch, and yaw. And then we have the P, I, and D on roll. The gyro, the set point. So the set point's the sticks. The gyro is trying to track that. The P, I, and D are making it try to follow it. And feed forward is reading right off of the set point. So as I move the sticks, it makes feed forward jump right away. And then P term and D term are kind of working to stabilize it after that part. We have that again then for pitch and then for yaw, and then our motor commands down here, what's the signals going out to the motors to make the ESC drive them. What I'm looking for here is that there's not a ton of noise in my motor signal going out to the ESC. So it's fairly smooth. So something that looks like that, and that's with Expo on. And I want to see that consistently all the way up through. And you can see this is a pretty good quad, and the tune is not that horrible. There's some adjustments I want to make on it, but it's not that bad. So you're saying, like, what does a good tune look like? This is a fairly good tune. It's not perfect, but it's fairly good. The noise profile on this thing is pretty good too, so it doesn't have excessive vibration, and those props aren't new. Those are beat up pretty good. So you can see what you're kind of looking for there. And if you have more noise than this, it's okay, but ideally you're trying to get down to something like this. I wouldn't stress about it too much, but these are good motor traces for amount of vibration, and that's all relative to the D term coming out on both. It's a combination of a lot of things: props, motors, flight controller, a good electronic isolation so you don't get a lot of feedback from the ESCs. Everything comes together to get something that's a good flying craft. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and look at is this first flip. And there's a couple things I'm going to look. This is primarily on roll that I'm making that move. And these oscillations on the backside here are not great. So we're going to try to address that kind of stuff. I'm going to expand this out a little bit. And there's some things I specifically am trying to see. First, does my feed forward boost out in front of the P term? So this is the feed forward trace. This is the P term trace. And literally this is the PID sum. You know, negative 14.6 plus negative 0.8 plus 4.6 plus negative 18. That goes to the PID sum and then goes directly out to the motor mixer and pushes the motor. So it's really just adding them up. You can see the feed forward is first on the scene to push towards the move. So my sticks are going down. This is what the set point is, which is to the left in this case. And you can see it's a roll to the left. And feed forward's first on the scene. The P term, you know, the gyro is lagging the set point gyro just a little bit, so the P term's jumping in to help push as well and pushing it into the move. I don't really have any notable overshoot here. And then obviously coming back across here, I have some either prop wash that it's trying to fight or just some general oscillations that, you know, maybe I'm a little close to the edge. And we'll look later in the log here to see if we still see oscillations like that. The other thing I'm trying to look for on feed forward here is that when I'm not doing moves, that it's stable, that it's not jerking around and jumping around from a bad RC signal or something like that. And you can see feed forward along this trace line here is pretty flat line until I specifically make the move, makes the move over here, and then flat lines back again once I'm done. You can see I kind of overshot the sticks here a little bit. So that's something I'm looking for. Again, looking so I don't have a ton of overshoot. And ultimately for feed forward, I'm also trying to see that how much P term is coming in to help push it. So I'm looking at this trace here. Ideally, when you have a feed forward in an optimal condition, the P term won't push a lot on stick moves. And I'll show you that a little later here in the log when we do the jerk moves back and forth. So that's the ideal situation. Is it okay if P term comes in and helps push? Of course, it's okay, but that means you're not tracking set point well. Whereas if you're right on set point with a well-tuned feed forward, there won't be any PID error. You'll be following the sticks exactly with the gyro, and which the gyro is representing what the quad's actually doing. So your quad will be right on your sticks, and there won't be any PID error for the P term to even push. That's the intent of feed forward. That's why feed forward's there. So in this little segment, we can see the roll looks okay. It's not perfect. Looks like we could use a little bit more feed forward here. And this oscillation here at the end, we might have our PDD balance a little too high, or our PD gains are just a little bit too high. But let's see what we see in other parts of the log. One of the things we want to look at when we're evaluating, can feed forward be a little stronger so we don't have any P term building here in another roll move that is a little bit later in the log, is our motor saturating down here at the bottom graph when we enter that move? Obviously, if the PID controller is pushing so hard that your motors are commanding 100% and the rig is just too heavy, it can't even keep up with that, that's just motor saturation. You're not going to be able to overcome that, basically, unless you get stronger motors or reduce the quad's weight. So down here, we can see that situation is we don't have that our motors are not getting to 100% commanded speed. If I bring this down on the right-hand side here, you know, at most we're getting up to 60, 70%. I think in this spot right here, yeah, we're getting up to like 75%, 85% on this one. So we're not hitting 100% saturation. So that tells me we could make feed forward a little bit higher to get more advanced push on this so that we don't have this little bit of latency right here. Although that is a really small amount of PID error or latency, so it's not that bad. Without feed forward, that'd be a lot bigger. But with feed forward, that's just kind of minor. So we'll probably up feed forward a little bit on the roll to see if we can overcome that and kind of go from there. Now looking on the downhill side of this move, we can see our gyro is right on top of set point here, but our motors are commanding to full to make that happen. So you can see that right here. If I turn off this, you can see how we're going to 100% motor push to get the machine to start to slow down out of this roll. So it's rolling pretty quick, 1,000 degrees per second. They go up to 100% to start to arrest that move. And you can see it works. The gyro's coming down and tracking pretty close here. It does get a little bit of a gap here. Again, with a little bit more feed forward, that probably wouldn't occur. We'll see. We'll put it in. Now looking at the pitch access, it's kind of the same thing. A little bit more feed forward could be used here. We're not hitting saturation in all scenarios. In some conditions, in a pitch or a roll move, there is motor saturation at the very top because that's where your super rate kind of kicks in on your rate profile. So that occurs, but I'm really looking down here at the onset of where the roll starts to occur. Or flip, does the motors go to saturation right away for that move? If not, you can usually add in some feed forward and some more advanced feed forward 2.0 stuff like increasing feed forward boost or things like that. But we'll leave that aside for now. Right now, the best thing to do is just increase those feed forward gains. Now through this section, we're doing the jerk moves back and forth on the roll axis, and you can see our gyro is completely tracking right on top of set point here. So there's our gyro trace, there's our set point trace. It's really hard to tell the difference between the two lines because it's right on it. Feed forward is doing most of the pushing in this scenario. You can see that P term is really not boosting up that much to enter the move. It is doing a little bit of work to keep it right on set point as it's out there at the further extent and kind of going into reversal. But even through the return right here, you can see the P term is pretty much flatlined. You're going to see it moving around a little bit, but you want to really see again here like this, that feed forward is doing most of the pushing. P term is kind of just there for, stabilizing and getting it onto set point itself. It's not doing a lot of the push. One thing you do want to watch out for is if you do get too much feed forward, you can actually have P term fighting feed forward because it's going to be trying to push it past. The gyro would be accelerating faster than you're moving your sticks out. So do look for reversal events where, the P term's pushing down with the D term. We don't want the P term to take over the D term's role. That it's pushing down against feed forward, that's a sign that obviously you'd have a little bit too much feed forward gain. You want to back that down a little bit. And of course, we're going to look for the same things along the pitch axis as we're doing those step moves back and forth and see, we're kind of looking for the same thing again. How much is the P term pushing versus the feed forward? You can see not too bad here, but maybe a little bit more feed forward on the pitch as well might be in order. On the yaw axis, same deal, same scenario. Got feed forward, P term, so we're trying to make sure on an induced yaw move that feed forward is doing most of the pushing. However, on yaw, this was a P of 45. I do want to boost that up because A lot of times in prop wash, when you're coming out of it, the motors are trying to spin up, and you'll see that like that yaw jerk a little bit right as the motors are starting to spin up. And that's typically a sign to me of your yaw P term is too low. On this flight, we have 42 as the yaw P term. I'm going to bump that up all the way to 90. So we have 120 as the feed forward here. That looks pretty good. I'm going to bump this up to 90 and see if that helps, because there's a little bit of a twitch of yaw when I'm coming out of prop wash in some scenarios, and I think yaw P term of 90 or 100 would help a lot with that scenario. Again, you should try to get on a 5-inch that yaw can track set point pretty well. And you can see here it's tracking it into the move. A little bit of latency afterwards here. And that I term is not accumulating too much that it's causing any yaw bounce back here. So you can see, again, the yaw gyro trace. There's the set point. And, you know, we're following along it pretty good here in our twitch moves. Okay, so for throbbles, you can actually see in this flight, which actually wasn't the flight I did in that video because I forgot to record black box, because I now have it on a switch, it doesn't always record. So I went out and did another flight, and I found a little bit better way to be able to hit that throttle without hitting the yaw. I was really just, you know, slapping it between my fingers kind of a thing instead of pinching it. And when I was pinching it, I was inducing some yaw, and I was doing that. So anyways, slapping it between the fingers, and I'm really trying to see that I have no nose bobbling. That worked pretty well, and you can see here on the pitch axis that I really don't have any bobble on the nose. Let me turn off the video here in the background, but we're looking at this trace line versus set point. So it's this blue line down here, and you can see it's moving around a little bit, but you saw just there in the HD, but you can see through the throttle blips here, I'm not really seeing the nose on pitch move. In the HD, I'm not seeing hardly any. And the same thing here on black box. If you were to see some of that, that's typically a P term issue, and you need higher P gains on your pitch axis, or if there's anything really deviating off a set point, that's a P term thing. And then you have to have your PDD balance all lined up first, and then you can just move your gains up so you're getting more P force to keep things on the set point. You don't want to do that without adjusting your D term at the same time. So again, I have a video series on how to tune your quad, and that also a link down below to the guide you can read. The first thing is getting your PDD balance, which seems pretty set on this quad. I'm not getting any bounce backs or whatnot. And then also you want to, you can move those gains up and down. Now in that section there where we're doing a full throttle punch and we just chop the throttle, we're trying to see and make sure that there's no drift. So there's no roll drift, pitch drift, or yaw drift. If you have any of that, that's typically a sign of your I gains are too low. If you're somewhat close to the Betaflight default, the I gains that are in there should be high enough. And what I would recommend is follow up with giving yourself a little bit more anti-gravity. Anti-gravity is when it's not during the throttle blips, it's after you're cutting the throttle. If you start to see drift or wobble, the anti-gravity boosts your I gains after you're jumping off a throttle too, and it keeps them so you're not getting any drift. As always, see that gyro, tracking the set point as tight as possible on all three axes, and then come in, look for, if it's not, why. If it's a sudden thing, then it's probably a P-term problem. If it's something over time, a slower, drifty kind of thing, that's I-term. Prop wash. So for prop wash, that is a balance between the P term and the D term. As you can see here, the D term is the biggest thing that oscillates and tries to fight against prop wash. It's way on the scene prior to any other term. It's not a P term driven thing. Prop wash is fought primarily by the D term. P term kind of just tries to keep it generally on track following the set point, but to actually stop the oscillation, that's a D term thing. So if you're getting prop wash, the term you need to increase is the D term. But you can't just arbitrarily do that. If you have your P to D balance, you got to bring the P term up with it at the same time so you keep that balance. Once you have that balance, as talked about in step 2 in my series, again, link to that in the upper right, you want to move those terms together. But what is the appropriate gain strength for the D term? Well, what we can do here is look in our logs. And what we're looking for is that our motors are getting up to a point of saturation. Once you're going through prop wash and your motors are doing this, where you're hitting this saturation point, if I come down here, you can see these motors are getting, this is at 95%, 95%. You can see them hitting up against the top here. Let me turn off the video. You can see them hitting off the top here. That is showing you're just about at the peak of where your D gains can really be. Any higher than that, it's just going to saturate the motors even more. You're not going to get anywhere. You'll just keep pushing up the gains, which there's negative ramifications to that with noise and other smooth sections of flight, but you're not going to get better prop wash handle. If you are getting the motor saturation point, one thing I typically do try to do then is just add a little bit more P term. Just take that ratio and just put in a little bit more. See how you like it. A lot of times you need to be fairly close to that edge for optimal prop wash performance, and see if you get any overshoot. You generally won't get any overshoot that you'll be able to notice, but you'll see your prop wash performance get a little bit better. The other thing you can do to increase your prop wash performance is just try toggling up this motor idle here just a little bit more. So maybe this is at 5.5, maybe go to 6.5 or 7. See how you like it. You're going to get less hang time inverted. I don't know how many of those moves you're doing, but if you're doing a ton, you will get a little bit less hang time. See if you dislike that versus the increased performance in prop wash. Obviously, your motor's not going down as low in RPM when you're at 0 stick, means that they don't have to rev up as much to combat prop wash, which you'll see. It generally helps quite a bit. So check out those two things. Smooth forward flight. So this is pretty straightforward. In this section here, we have some pretty, smooth trace lines. That's what you're really looking for. Obviously, this is really noise dependent. If your filters are way off or janky, or you just have a really bad quad and you just can't cover it up enough with the filtering, it's going to be really tough to get that smooth forward flight. Obviously, you want to make sure it's not a super windy day for the measurement of this, because that's a factor. But the day I was out there wasn't necessarily calm, but you should be able to get smooth forward flight. This was doing a good job for my perception of it, and you can see that my motor commands with exaggeration on are not, it's just real steady forward through there. I'm not getting a lot of pit activity, and that's kind of what we're looking for. Here you see a little bit, there might be a little bit of a gust of wind that came in there and hit it, and you can see the PIDs adjusting to cancel that out. Obviously, fighting wind is kind of like the same thing of fighting prop wash. You have to have everything just dialed in for that optimal performance on, not getting a lot of shakes in windy conditions. Okay, so with all that, let's go in here and see some of the tweaks that I'm going to make based on this. One of the things I want to do here right away is I want to take this P yaw up to 90. I want to see how that performs. Talked about a little bit more feed forward on the pitch and roll, so I'm going to take this up to 200, and I'm going to take this up to 210, I think. I don't know, something's telling me 220. When you're adjusting your feed forward gains, they're not real sensitive, so I would say they're 10 times less sensitive. So And your D term and other terms, if you move them like 5 or 10 points, with feed forward, it's usually like 10 or 20 points. I don't know, just doesn't seem as sensitive to larger movements. So that's my best advice there. Honestly, it's a little, with all this, it's always a little bit of trial and error. The PDD magnitude seemed pretty good. I was hitting saturation, so I'm going to leave that where it's at. The other thing I want to adjust is my filters a little bit here. I was having my RPM filters notches go pretty low. I'm going to bring that up to, let's just do 150 and get those up out of the way there. I think that's the default. I think the other thing I'm going to do on this is I'm going to move these up to a 1.5 multiplier just to even it out nice. And I really want to turn off the dynamic notch and give that a go. But before I do that, I just love that safety net, knowing that if I get a beat up prop or something goes janky, that it causes some sort of huge harmonic that, in addition to the RPM filters, that dynamic notch will go and jump on that sucker and help me out. So I'm going to leave that go for now, but I am going to go to the CLI. I'm going to type get RPM. And in here, we have the RPM gyro, RPM notch Q. I'm going to go ahead and hit set. I'm going to take that all the way up to 1,000. I did some recent tests with the matrix filter, and man, taking your RPM notches up to 1,000 really reduces latency quite a bit, and they still do a really good job. So I'm going to take that up and see where it goes. Maybe, maybe 1,000, a little aggressive, maybe 800, but the default's 500. I'm going to take them up north of that, go with 1,000, see how it goes. Like I said, the quad's pretty clean, almost a little too clean when looking at those traces. So I'm going to move it up a little bit. I still want to have smooth forward flight. So if I make these adjustments and now my smooth forward flight isn't smooth, maybe I'll back some of that down. But, it was nice and smooth. So let's see if we can push that a little bit more. Obviously, prop wash and other things are benefit from your filters having less latency. There's a lot of things that benefit. The only thing that's a downside of having less filters is maybe the smooth forward flight and motor temps, but that's usually not an issue for me. It's not that warm out here. I don't live in Florida or some really tropical climate. Okay, so those are the tweaks we're going to make. We'll go back out, do some fun flying, maybe throw in some of these step moves into some of those, capture log, take a look at it every now and then. This is kind of how I tune things out. I don't, I'll try to get the core of it in there, which this is already, the core of the tune is there. And then every now and then, as I'm flying or doing other stuff for videos, YouTube content, or just having a fun fly, I'll get some logs, take a look at them, maybe do some of the step moves or whatnot near end or in one of the packs, and see what the tune is like, maybe tweak some things out a little bit here and there, just fiddling, and see if I can dial it in just a little bit more and more. So again, just like in that video talked about, you definitely want to induce step moves to fly to your perfect tune. With that, logging can help you see some of the issues that you might be able to address and kind of hone right in on what's the term as the issue, what term can I adjust that give me a better result, so on and so forth. How close you work with feed forward to get your sticks to perfectly track set point, that's really up to you. Some people don't use feed forward at all. You will get a lag on the gyro, but sometimes people are used to that and that's the feel they like. You don't have to use feed forward. But obviously, nobody wants prop wash, nobody wants throbbles, everybody wants smooth forward flight. So with those, you got to get your PDD balance right, your PDD gain strength right, and your I term and anti-gravity stuff all honed in. Again, if you want a more in-depth guide on PID tuning, I'll drop a link down below. It's a whole guide PDF on going step-by-step how to tune a PID controller. And that also has a backup video series, which I will have in the cards here, and a link down below to that, where you can go through each of these steps one by one. It really comes down to doing these flight moves, taking a look at the logs, breaking it apart one at a time. Also, that black box 101, do check that out if you're starting to get just used to the trace lines and what P term and I term and D term are, those kind of things. Check that out. But between those, Black Box 101 and the PID tuning series and the guide, you should have a step-by-step process to follow that by the time you go through that stuff, you should understand all the terminology and all the terms, and hopefully you can fly your way to a perfect tune. Thanks, everybody, and I hope this helped.